Welcome back to PlotFall. Settle in as we gently explore the history of why you wouldn't last a day in feudal Japan. Before we begin, if you find value in these stories, perhaps take a quiet moment to like the video and subscribe. It helps others find the channel. You can also let me know in the comments where you're listening from and the time. It's always fascinating to see our quiet community grow around the world. Now, find a comfortable position, dim the lights or turn on a soft fan for background noise, and let's ease into tonight's story together. The first light of dawn in feudal Japan arrives not with the jarring blare of an alarm clock, no insistent digital glow slicing through the darkness. Instead, your day begins softly, almost reluctantly. Imagine the faintest papery rustle, a shoji screen perhaps, sliding open somewhere in the dwelling, a sound as delicate as dry leaves brushing against wood. Listen closely, and you might hear the distant, somewhat mournful crow of a rooster, its call echoing thinly across the landscape, a solitary herald in a world still cloaked in the deep blues and grays of pre-dawn. The air that greets your skin is cool, perhaps even a little sharp. It carries the earthy scent of damp soil, the subtle fragrance of pine from the surrounding forests, and maybe the first faint wisp of wood smoke from a neighbor's slowly kindling hearth, a sign that another soul is stirring. This air is crisp, untainted by the familiar hum and haze of modern life, but it might also feel strangely empty, lacking the background symphony of a city. You lie there for a moment, perhaps on a futon laid upon tatami mats, the coolness of the floor seeping through. There's no immediate rush, no instant light at the flick of a switch. Just the slow, incremental brightening of the world outside your thin walls, the gradual emergence of sounds as life begins to stir, one breath at a time. This is the quiet before the inevitable toil, a brief, almost sacred stillness. You are awake, not by demand, but by the gentle, persistent rhythm of nature itself. And as you lie there, that coolness from the floor isn't just a gentle sensation, it's a persistent, almost intimate chill. The morning air, raw and utterly unfiltered by any modern convenience, seeps into your simple sleeping space. It's sharp in your lungs, carrying the distinct, earthy scent of damp soil, perhaps the faint, acrid tang of distant wood smoke from an early kitchen fire, and the untamed breath of the awakening land. There's no comforting hum of central heating here, no thick, cloud-like duvet to cocoon yourself within. Your bed, assuming a measure of good fortune, is a thin futon, a layer of padded cotton, perhaps a little lumpy, a little worn, laid directly onto the woven rush of the tatami mat floor. You can feel the texture of the tatami through the futon, its firm, slightly coarse weave pressing against you. It's a stark, humbling contrast to the plush, springy mattresses we've grown accustomed to, offering precious little insulation against the unyielding hardness beneath, or the cold that seems to rise from the very ground itself. You might find yourself instinctively curled into a tight ball, a small, human knot, trying to preserve any precious warmth your own body has generated through the long, dark night. This isn't a gentle, cozy awakening. It's a daily, shivery reintroduction to reality, a stark reminder of your direct, unbuffered connection to the elements, even before the sun has truly begun its ascent to warm the day. As full consciousness eventually arrives, it doesn't bring with it a gentle clarity, but rather a creeping, profound sense of disorientation that washes over you in slow, unsettling waves. Your eyelids flutter open, heavy and reluctant, struggling to make sense of the dim light filtering through. It's not the familiar glow of a phone screen or the reassuring solidity of painted drywall you see, but something utterly alien. Thin paper screens, the shoji, form the walls around you, their delicate latticework perhaps casting faint, intricate shadows. They offer little in the way of soundproofing, and even less a sense of robust, modern security. A strong gust of wind might make them whisper and rattle. Above, a low wooden ceiling, its beams dark with age and smoke, seems to press down, making the space feel strangely intimate, yet also subtly confining. The air itself feels different, thinner, perhaps, and cooler than you'd prefer. carrying the faint, unfamiliar sense of seasoned wood, the slightly musty fragrance of tatami mats underfoot, and maybe a lingering trace of wood smoke from a distant hearth. It's a world away from the manufactured fragrances or sterile, recycled air of our own time. You might instinctively reach for your phone, your glasses, only to find nothing but the coarse texture of the woven mat beneath you. There's no plastic, no reassuring hum of electricity, no distant rumble of traffic, just an unnerving, pervasive quiet, perhaps broken only by the rustle of leaves outside or the distant crow of a rooster, sounds you can't quite place in this new, bewildering context. This isn't a dream, no matter how much you might wish it. This, with its stark, beautiful simplicity and its deeply unsettling foreignness, is feudal Japan. The realization settles slowly. A heavy, cold stone sinking in the pit of your stomach, a quiet dread mingling with a strange, dislocated awe. The awe, however, quickly begins to curdle as the immediate reality of your situation asserts itself. Perhaps you hear the soft scuff of straw sandals on a packed earth floor, a rhythmic approaching sound. A figure appears, maybe a farmer with weathered hands, or a woman in a simple, unfamiliar garment, silhouetted against the light filtering through a paper shoji screen. You try to speak, your voice a hesitant croak, "Hello," or perhaps, "Can you help me?" The words feel thick and clumsy in your own mouth, foreign even to your own ears in this stark new quiet. They turn. Their face, when you finally see it, is etched with a life entirely alien to yours, their expression unreadable. And then they speak. It's not just the words themselves, though those are a cascade of sounds you can't begin to decipher, perhaps sharp, clipped syllables that feel almost percussive, or long, flowing vowels with intonations that convey emotions you cannot possibly name. It's the utter lack of recognition in their eyes. Not hostile, not necessarily, but profoundly blank, like staring at a polished dark stone that reflects nothing back. Your carefully chosen words, your urgent questions, simply dissipate into the cool morning air. Meaningless puffs of breath against the backdrop of an ancient, unyielding culture. They might tilt their head, a slight frown creasing their brow, the way one might observe a babbling brook, a natural yet ultimately untranslatable phenomenon. The silence that follows their alien speech is heavy, profound, and a chill, deeper than the morning air, begins to seep into your bones, settling low in your stomach. This isn't just being lost in a strange place. This is the sudden, stark realization of being utterly, terrifyingly alone, adrift in a vast sea of unmeaning. Your most fundamental tool for connection, your language, is useless here. The first, and perhaps most insurmountable wall has just slammed down before you. Silent and absolute. A quiet sense of isolation, cold and vast, begins to creep in, wrapping itself around you like a shroud. That chilling cloak of isolation, woven from incomprehensible words, settles even heavier as their eyes, dark and unreadable, travel over you. It's not just your foreign face or your bewildered expression that marks you. It's everything you're wearing. Your brightly colored synthetic fabrics, perhaps a soft t-shirt, your comfortable jeans, even your sturdy modern shoes, must seem like garments from another realm, utterly alien, against the muted, earthy tones of their own simple wear. These clothes, your everyday armor in another life, now shout your otherness from 100 paces, a beacon of unwelcome difference. You'd realize with a sinking feeling that tightens your chest that blending in isn't just advisable. It's essential for even the slimmest chance of navigating this new old world. The solution, if one could even be procured from a suspicious and wary populace, would be a coarse peasant's garment. Imagine the feel of it. The rough, unyielding fibers of hemp or perhaps ramie, stiff and undeniably abrasive against skin, so accustomed to the gentle caress of soft cottons and yielding polyesters. It would chafe with every movement, a constant, irritating reminder of your profound displacement, each scratch a whisper of your vulnerability. The fit would be crude, shapeless, offering little protection from the elements beyond a basic covering. It would likely smell faintly of wood smoke, old sweat, and the damp earth of the fields, the unvarnished scent of poverty and toil. This isn't fashion. It's a raw uniform of survival, a world away from the familiar comfort you took for granted only moments ago. The simple act of dressing yourself, once an unconscious habit, would become a deliberate, uncomfortable surrender. And just as the persistent chafe of those coarse garments begins to truly settle into your awareness, a far more primal, less negotiable human need announces itself. You look around, a growing unease mixing with the physical discomfort. Where, in this rustic, unfamiliar landscape, does one attend to such matters? There are no discreet signs, no comforting porcelain gleam in the distance. Instead, you might be directed towards a simple, unadorned wooden structure, little more than a shed, or perhaps just a designated patch of earth partially screened by a few rough planks, known simply as a **Kawaya**. This is your destination. As you approach, the air itself changes, growing thick with an earthy, pungent aroma that speaks of long use in a profound, cyclical connection to the soil, the smell of life in its most unadorned form. It's the scent of human reality, unmasked and unrefined. Inside, or perhaps simply behind that screen, you'd find a basic pit dug into the earth, or perhaps a wooden trough. No flush, no running water, just the dark ground below, patiently waiting. Privacy, as you might cherish it, could be a shared concept here, or a luxury not always afforded in these communal arrangements. Forget your scented soaps and soft paper. Here, nature's call is answered with a directness that might feel shockingly rudimentary. The entire experience would be a stark, humbling lesson in the realities of pre-modern sanitation, a raw encounter with the ground floor of existence. It's a visceral reminder of how much of our daily comfort is built upon systems utterly invisible to us now, systems completely absent in this feudal world. This, too, is part of your day, a moment of profound vulnerability stripped of all modern illusion, leaving you to confront the unvarnished basics of life itself. Having navigated the, shall we say, prophet-sire realities of personal care, a deep breath of outside air might seem like a welcome reprieve. You slide open a shoji screen, the delicate paper whispering against its wooden frame, a sound that feels both ancient and unfamiliar. As you step out, perhaps onto a sun-warmed, worn wooden veranda that creaks softly under your weight, or directly onto a dusty, unpaved lane where chickens scatter, the world outside doesn't just greet you, it scrutinizes you. Instantly, you become the focal point, a sudden, unexpected brushstroke on a familiar canvas. Every head that is able turns. The rhythmic thud of rice being pounded in a distant mortar might pause, just for a beat. Children, moments before lost in the intricate patterns of a dirt-drawn game, freeze mid-gesture, their dark, intelligent eyes wide and unblinking, absorbing every detail of your foreign presence. These are not necessarily hostile stares, not yet, but they are unwavering, a mixture of profound curiosity and perhaps a flicker of deep-seated suspicion. After all, in a world where communities are tight-knit and strangers are rare, you are a living enigma. A low murmur ripples through the air, a sibilant wave of hushed Japanese you cannot comprehend. Yet its meaning is clear. You are being discussed, dissected. It's the sound of 1,000 unspoken questions, of cautious whispers shared behind raised hands. Is it the peculiar texture of your hair, so different from their straight, dark locks? The strange cut and feel of your clothes, so alien amidst the practical kimonos and rough-spun fabrics of daily life? Each sustained gaze is a pinprick, a constant, gentle reminder that you are an outsider, a temporary disruption in the intricate, well-worn tapestry of their existence. You are a story they haven't heard, a color they can't quite place, making you feel utterly, irrevocably alone, even surrounded by the bustle of this bygone world. This initial sense of being out of place, of being a loose thread in a perfectly woven brocade, would soon crystallize into something far more profound. You'd begin to feel it, not just see it, an invisible architecture shaping every interaction, every glance, every pathway through the crowded lanes. It's the unspoken, unyielding social order, a framework as sturdy and confining as the thickest castle wall. From the proud samurai, their lacquered armor gleaming subtly even in muted light, their twin swords a silent, ever-present promise of swift authority, their silk kimonos whispering of privilege as they glide past, to the farmer, back bent under the sun, hands stained with the rich, dark earth that defines his very existence and smells of honest toil, everyone knew their station with an almost cellular certainty. Imagine trying to navigate this. A casual word offered to the wrong person, a glance held a moment too long, or even the simple act of standing in a space not meant for your perceived rank. These weren't mere social blunders. They were tremors against the bedrock of their world. The air itself would seem to thin. Conversations would abruptly cease, replaced by a sudden, pointed silence, and the weight of countless eyes, trained by generations of unwavering conformity, would press down on you. This wasn't a system you could charm your way through or cleverly subvert with modern notions of equality. It was breathed in with the morning mist that clung to the rice paddies and settled with the evening dew upon the temple roofs, absolute and utterly pervasive. Stepping out of line wasn't just discouraged. It was, for most, simply unimaginable, a deviation from the very fabric of being, a discordant note in an ancient, solemn song. And one of the most intricate verses in that song, a constant, visible performance, was the art of the bow. Imagine, if you will, moving through your day where every encounter, every fleeting glance from a passing samurai or a humble farmer demands a precise bodily calibration. It wasn't merely a polite nod, a casual dip of the head as you might offer today. Oh no, this was a language spoken with the spine, a silent conversation rich with nuance, understood by all, and unforgiving of error. The very air seemed to hum with these unspoken rules of hierarchy, a subtle pressure against your skin. You'd feel it in the way a merchant lowered his gaze, his bow deeper, held for a breath longer, than the one you, a bewildered newcomer from another time, might awkwardly attempt to return. The soft rustle of silk kimonos, the gentle scuff of geta on packed earth or polished wood, all movements were punctuated by these dips and inclinations. A slight miscalculation in the angle, a shade too shallow for a person of higher status, a fraction too deep for someone beneath you, could send ripples of profound unease, or worse, outright offense, through the meticulously woven social fabric. There was no handy guidebook for the uninitiated, no forgiving smile for a clumsy gesture from an outsider. Each bow was an instant testament to your understanding of your exact place, your keen awareness of everyone else's. The wrong timing, holding a bow for a moment too long or cutting it short with perceived haste, might be interpreted as insolence, or perhaps even a subtle, dangerous challenge. Consider the constant, quiet tension, the sheer mental effort of continually assessing, calculating, performing this delicate ballet of deference, from the moment the pale morning sun first filtered through the paper shoji screens to the deep, lamplit shadows of evening. And then, of course, there was the soundscape of conversation itself. Beyond the physical dance of deference, an even more intricate web awaited, the very words you spoke. Imagine, for a moment, listening not just to what is said, but to asterisks how it's said, with an almost painful acuity. Each syllable, each carefully chosen particle, could be a step on solid ground or a stumble into a hidden pitfall of social disgrace. The Japanese language of this era was, and still is, a landscape of delicate peaks and valleys, navigated by a complex system of honorifics, kigo. These weren't just polite additions like sir or madam sprinkled on top. They were fundamental alterations to verbs, nouns, and entire sentence structures, all designed to precisely calibrate and publicly display the social distance between you and whomever you were unfortunate enough to be speaking with. Now picture yourself, your mind, accustomed to the breezy, almost careless informality of our modern tongues, attempting to navigate this treacherous linguistic terrain. Your casual, "Hey, what's up?" directed to a stern-faced samurai, or a simple, unadorned thanks tossed towards a village elder, wouldn't just be a minor gaffe, a little social hiccup. Oh no, it would land with the jarring force of a roughly thrown stone in a perfectly still, raked Zen garden, a shocking, almost violent display of utter disrespect. The air, already thin with unspoken rules, would grow colder. Eyes, previously neutral, would narrow, perhaps not in immediate, overt anger, but in a kind of bewildered, deeply personal offense. You'd feel that sudden, crushing weight of unspoken judgment, the dawning, sickening realization that your words, meant to be so harmless, so everyday, had instead painted you as utterly uncouth, breathtakingly arrogant, or perhaps even dangerously, willfully ignorant. The silence that followed your verbal blunder would be thick, almost suffocating, filled with the unsaid understanding that you simply, fundamentally, didn't belong. That thick, suffocating silence, heavy with unsaid judgment, is your first true lesson. It's a chilling introduction to the reality that, in feudal Japan, the most dangerous rules are often the ones never spoken aloud. Imagine trying to navigate a vast, invisible web. Its gossamer threads, spun from centuries of tradition, connecting every person, every object, every fleeting moment. Each nearly imperceptible strand is an expectation, a subtle code governing not just your words, but the precise angle of your bow, the way your hands rest in your lap, even the silent language of your eyes when someone of higher status glides into the room. You wouldn't be handed a convenient manual upon arrival, no friendly guide to these treacherous undercurrents. You'd be expected to simply know, to have absorbed these nuances, as if by osmosis, from the very air you breathe. A gesture made a fraction too soon, a glance held a moment too long, perhaps even the innocent act of admiring the wrong part of a meticulously arranged garden. These aren't just quaint little blunders, they are tears in the delicate, almost sacred fabric of social harmony. The consequences? They might not be a swift sword, not initially. Instead, imagine a slow, creeping isolation. A gentle but firm exclusion. Doors once open might now be politely, but firmly, shut. Favors once hinted at might dissolve like mist. You'd carry the weight of being perpetually out of sync. A constant, low hum of anxiety, your unwelcome companion. Ignorance, you'd swiftly learn, offers no protection here. It's merely an amplifier for your foreignness, a stark highlighting of your profound and perhaps perilous unsuitability for this intricately ordered world. But this slow social erosion, this gentle suffocation of your spirit, is not the only shadow that might fall upon you. There are sharper, more immediate reminders of your precarious position, lurking just beneath the surface of polite society. You might, perhaps through a hushed warning from a sympathetic local, or more chillingly, through witnessing its aftermath, learn of a concept known as kiri sute gomen. It translates quite literally to, quote, authorization to cut and discard. This was the grim prerogative of the samurai class. Should a commoner, like yourself, be perceived as disrespectful, fail to show the proper deference or obstruct their path, a samurai could, with legal impunity, strike them down. Imagine, just for a moment, the sheer weight of that knowledge. You walk down a narrow, dusty laneway. The air is thick with the smell of wood smoke and damp earth. Around a corner, a samurai approaches, his movements precise, his gaze unwavering. The soft clink of his swords, the asterisk daisho, against his lacquered armor, is a subtle, constant percussion. What constitutes disrespect? A glance held too long. A failure to bow deeply enough, quickly enough. The rules are unwritten, interpreted in an instant by the one holding the swords. There is no trial, no appeal, just the sudden, cold whisper of steel. And then, perhaps nothing. This wasn't necessarily an everyday occurrence, not a bloodbath on every street corner, but the potential was always there. A silent, heavy cloak draped over every interaction with the warrior class. It was an ever-present underscore to the immense power imbalance, a stark, cold truth that shaped the very air you would breathe, reminding you that your life could be forfeit for a misstep, you might not even realize you'd made. Beyond the sharp edge of a samurai's whim, an even more pervasive force governed your existence, the unyielding grip of the collective. Imagine, if you can, those personal dreams, those quiet whispers of ambition that flicker within you now, simply not registering. Or if they did surface, they'd be seen as peculiar, perhaps even a little dangerous, like a lone, untended ember threatening to set the whole communal rice barn ablaze. Your life, from the moment the sun's first pale, watery light touched the delicate paper screens of your small, often crowded, shared dwelling, belonged not to you, but to the family unit, the times-IE, and then, extending outwards like the roots of an ancient tree to the village, a tight, interwoven knot of interconnected fates. Every swing of the hoe in the damp, clinging mud of the paddy field, every carefully woven strand of rough straw destined for a new sandal, every meticulously angled bow was an act performed for the survival and continuation of the group. The very notion of striking out on your own, of chasing a purely personal, self-aggrandizing goal, it would be as alien, as incomprehensible as a river deciding to flow uphill. There was a certain profound, almost submerged comfort, perhaps, in this shared burden, this intricate human tapestry where every single thread was deemed vital. But the air you'd breathe, day in and day out, would be thick with unspoken expectations, the silent, ever-present knowledge that your individual worth was measured almost solely by your contribution to the whole. Your own secret desires, they'd be like smooth, heavy stones dropped into a deep, still village well, sinking quickly, silently, leaving only ripples of duty visible on the surface for others to see. And those ripples of duty seen on the surface of that village well would demand a sameness, a quiet alignment from everyone. To stand out, even slightly, was to invite a scrutiny that you, with your thoroughly modern sensibilities, would find utterly suffocating. Imagine for a moment trying to simply walk through a village. Your gait, perhaps a little too confident, a little too hurried by their standards, would be the first thing to draw eyes. Not angry eyes, not yet, but intensely curious ones, like those of a cat watching a strange new beetle. Your clothes, even if you tried to approximate local attire, would likely hang wrong, or be of a weave or color that subtly screamed outsider. The way you made eye contact, too direct, or perhaps not direct enough, according to unspoken rules, could be your first unintended offense. Every gesture, every unconsciously modern turn of phrase, would be noted, catalogued, whispered about in the flickering lamplight of nearby homes. There was no room for the bold individualist, the flamboyant personality, unless they held immense power. For you, a nobody, to be different was to be suspect. It was like wearing a brightly colored bird costume in a flock of sparrows. You wouldn't just be noticed. You'd be perceived as a disruption, a potential danger, an unknown quantity in a world that clung to the known for its very survival. The quiet hum of conformity was the baseline rhythm of life, and your discordant note would not be easily tolerated. And as a new day dawns, this feeling of being slightly out of step, of navigating an unfamiliar rhythm, would follow you even to your first simple meal. You might awaken on a futon, the thin mattress laid upon tatami mats. The air, still cool with the remnants of night. There's no scent of brewing coffee, no promise of buttery toast or sugary cereal. Instead, what awaits you is sustenance, pure and unadorned. Imagine a small, low table. Upon it, a humble bowl of steamed white rice, its grains plump and slightly sticky, radiating a gentle, comforting warmth. Beside it, a lacquered bowl of miso soup, the cloudy broth perhaps holding delicate cubes of tofu or slivers of seaweed, its aroma subtly earthy and savory. A tiny dish might offer a few intensely flavored pickled vegetables, perhaps some crisp, salty daikon radish or a sliver of sour plum, their sharp tang meant to awaken the palate and aid digestion. This is your breakfast. There's a quiet integrity to it, a nourishment designed to sustain, not to excite. Notice what isn't there. No burst of sugar to kickstart your morning, no deep, roasted aroma of coffee beans, no creamy milk. For a system accustomed to such morning rituals, this simple, umami-rich fare could feel surprisingly stark, almost medicinal. It's a quiet reminder that every aspect of life here, even the very first taste of the day, operates on principles you are only just beginning to understand. A gentle but firm lesson in a different kind of satisfaction. That simple breakfast, the miso soup, the rice, perhaps a sliver of pickled vegetable, it wasn't a choice made from an abundance of options. For many, it was the best they could hope for, a hard-won reprieve from hunger and sometimes more than they'd reliably get. Forget strolling through a bustling market, a kaleidoscope of vibrant colors from radishes and greens, the sweet perfume of ripe fruits mingling with the earthy scent of mushrooms. Such abundance was a distant dream for most. For the common farmer, the artisan, even the lower-ranking samurai, food was a constant, nagging worry, a quiet thrum of anxiety beneath the surface of every waking hour. Consider that feeling of an empty stomach, a gentle gnawing. Now, imagine that sensation not as a brief interlude before you open a well-stocked pantry, but as a persistent, unwelcome shadow, a guest who always overstays. Every single grain of rice, a tiny, pearlescent bead, was cultivated with back-breaking effort. You'd see it planted in waterlogged paddies, feel the sun beat down relentlessly as you weeded, hear the rhythmic swish of the scythe at harvest. Each grain represented not just sustenance, but life itself, meticulously guarded. A poor harvest, signaled by too much relentless rain turning fields to muddy quagmires, or a sky stubbornly devoid of life-giving clouds for weeks on end, wasn't just a disappointment. It was a harbinger of true suffering, the very real and terrifying threat of famine. That word alone could cast a profound chill, a specter that haunted entire villages, making the careful rationing of every mouthful, the almost reverent storing of every edible scrap, not just good practice, but a desperate daily prayer for survival. The weight of that worry was a constant companion, a silent reminder of life's fragility. Even beyond the gnawing emptiness of hunger, simply quenching your thirst presented its own quiet lottery of life and death. Imagine, for a moment, that deep, parched feeling in your throat, a persistent companion in the oppressive humidity of a Japanese summer, or after a long day of toiling in the fields. Your options weren't a chilled bottle from the fridge, or even a tap with reliably treated water flowing clear and cool. No, you'd likely be heading to the village well, a communal hub of daily life, its stone edge worn smooth by countless hands. Or perhaps you'd seek out a nearby stream, its waters whispering over smooth, moss-covered stones, deceptively picturesque. The well water drawn up by a creaking wooden bucket on a fraying rope might look clear enough at first glance, perhaps a little cloudy with fine sediment stirred from the bottom. But what unseen, microscopic guests lurked within those seemingly innocent depths? Animal waste from nearby livestock, agricultural runoff carrying who knows what, or the subtle, insidious seepage from less than hygienic human activities just a little further upstream. All could find their way into that vital shared source. Streams and rivers were no safer, often serving as the convenient, flowing dumping ground for all manner of village refuse. The concept of germ theory, of invisible assassins in the water, was an unknown future. What looked clear, or merely tasted a bit earthy, could still be a potent cocktail of dysentery, cholera, or a host of other debilitating, often fatal, waterborne illnesses. Each sip was a gamble, each ladleful a silent prayer. It wouldn't be the one to invite days of burning fever, wrenching cramps, and a slow, miserable decline. It's a rather grim thought, isn't it? That the very liquid essential for life could so easily and invisibly become its quiet, indifferent betrayer, making a simple drink a daily dance with danger. Not. Beyond the perilous sips of water, should you survive that daily gamble, another reality would dawn with the rising sun. A reality of relentless, grinding toil, unless fate had placed you gently into a more privileged cradle. Imagine, for a moment, those first pale rays painting the sky. For most, this wasn't a signal for quiet contemplation, but an unyielding summons. Perhaps it was to the rice paddies, the thick mud squelching around your ankles, cool at first, then chilling as the hours wore on. Your back would ache with a constancy you'd never known, bending and planting under a sun that climbed, peaked, and then slowly, grudgingly, began its descent. The only clock was the light in the sky, and the only reward, often, was just enough to see the next sunrise, to do it all again. Or picture yourself in a cramped, smoky workshop, the air hazy with dust motes dancing in any stray sunbeam. The atmosphere might be thick with the sweet, sharp scent of freshly cut cedar, or the acrid bite of hot metal and charcoal from a nearby forge. The rhythmic thud of a mallet against wood, the rasp of a saw, the insistent, repetitive scrape of a plane smoothing a rough plank. These would be the metronomes of your long day. Your fingers, raw and blistered at first, would eventually thicken, the skin growing tough as old leather, just to endure the constant friction of simple tools, hour upon weary hour. There was little concept of quote-unquote in time beyond the fading light that made work impossible, and the deep, bone-weary exhaustion that finally claimed you. A stark, unyielding existence, a world away from the poetry and cherry blossoms we so often associate with this era. Let's begin by imagining the sheer bone-deep effort poured into every single meal that might, if you were lucky, reach your humble bowl. Picture, if you will, the sun, a relentless eye in the vast blue, beating down upon your conical straw hat as you stand, ankle-deep, in the cool, slick mud of a rice paddy. Your back, a landscape of constant ache, bends and straightens, planting delicate green shoots one by one, an endless, painstaking task. The air is thick with the smell of damp earth, the persistent drone of insects, and perhaps the distant rhythmic splash of water from a hand-cranked irrigation wheel, a sound of hope and hard labor. Each grain of rice, the very lifeblood of the land and the currency of survival, wasn't just grown, it was coaxed, battled for, against the threat of drought, the terror of flood, the silent creep of pests. Your hands, rough and calloused, would know the intimate texture of the soil, the fragility of each seedling, the sting of nettles hidden amongst the crops. There were no rumbling tractors, no chemical wonders to call upon, just human muscle, simple wooden or bamboo tools that felt like extensions of your own weary limbs, and an almost prayerful attention to the whims of nature. A bad harvest wasn't just disappointing, it was a specter of hunger. To then see even a single grain spilled, or a portion of precious food discarded would feel like a profound disrespect, a near sacrilegious act. Our modern overflowing bins, piled high with forgotten leftovers and half-eaten meals, would seem an almost alien concept, a bewildering, almost offensive luxury born of an abundance they could scarcely dream of. It makes you wonder, doesn't it, how our perception of value shifts so dramatically with such ease. And that deep-seated value, that near reverence for every grain, was forged in the crucible of unyielding daily toil. The tools to coax sustenance from the earth, or to shape the raw materials of existence in feudal Japan, were extensions of human will, certainly, but also stark reminders of human limitation. Forget the satisfying whir of a power drill, or the effortless glide of a modern saw. Picture instead the implements of that era, ingenious in their simplicity perhaps, but utterly unforgiving in their demands. Imagine you're faced with a day's work. Your primary tool might be a farmer's hoe, the kwa, a sturdy length of wood, its iron tip painstakingly forged and sharpened. Its weight, though, is a constant, dull presence in your hands, a drag on your muscles hour after hour. Or perhaps you need to shape timber. Your saw is pulled by hand, each stroke a conscious effort, its teeth catching, the fine wood dust settling like a pale mist on your damp skin. There's no gentle hum of electricity, no motor to shoulder the burden, just the rhythmic thud of wood on earth, the rasp of metal on wood, and the persistent strain in your own shoulders and back, a constant companion from the first light of dawn till the fading embers of dusk. There are no ergonomic grips here, no vibration dampeners, no lightweight alloys. The handle of your tool, perhaps worn smooth by generations of sweat and calloused hands before yours, still feels unyieldingly hard. Every task is a direct contest between your physical endurance and the stubborn resistance of the material world. This was a life where strength wasn't just an attribute, but a fundamental requirement, where the simplicity of the tools belied the immense, grinding resilience they demanded from those who wielded them, day in and weary day out. And what if that relentless, grinding resilience finally gave way? Imagine waking one morning, the familiar ache in your back now a burning fever, your throat feeling like a landscape of sharp stones. There are no sick days as we understand them now, no comforting phone call to a manager, no guaranteed rest. The sun still climbs, utterly indifferent to your personal plight, and with its ascent comes the unwavering expectation to contribute. To falter, to stay huddled on your thin futon, means your small, precious rice bowl might remain empty, a stark and immediate consequence, a silent, gnawing reminder. Your family, perhaps your wife or an elderly relative, might hover, their faces etched with a quiet worry. They'd offer remedies whispered down through generations. A pungent herbal brew, perhaps, tasting strongly of bitter roots and damp earth, or a poultice of mashed leaves, feeling cool and a little strange against your fevered skin. These weren't mere placebos. They represented the accumulated wisdom of centuries of observation, of painstaking trial, and often painful error, born from a deep, if sometimes flawed, connection to the natural world around them. But their efficacy was always a gamble, and an infection that today might be cleared with a simple pill could very well have become a slow, inexorable decline. So you'd push through, wouldn't you? The alternative was simply too bleak to contemplate for long. That cough that racks your chest is stifled. The dizziness fought back, because the unyielding rhythm of survival in feudal Japan didn't pause for personal frailties, no matter how severe. And as you navigate this world, pushing past your own physical discomforts, another constant presence would begin to wear on your modern sensibilities. It wouldn't be a sudden shock, perhaps, but a slow, seeping awareness, a background hum of potential danger. It's the glint of polished steel, the subtle curve of a blade housed in its lacquered saya, worn with such casual authority at the hip of nearly every samurai you'd encounter. Everywhere you'd look, or so it would seem, a member of this warrior class would pass, and with every samurai came the swords. Not one, but typically two, the long, graceful katana, and the shorter, utilitarian wakizashi, together known as the daisho. These weren't museum pieces, carefully preserved behind glass. They were working tools, extensions of the samurai's will, finely honed and terrifyingly sharp. You'd see the intricate silk wrappings on the hilts, perhaps catch a glimpse of a carefully wrought tsuba, the hand guard. But mostly you'd register the deadly simplicity of their purpose, the cold, hard fact of their immediate lethality. This constant, casual display of lethal force would be profoundly unsettling. Imagine the weight of that visual, day in and day out, woven into the very fabric of public life. Each blade a silent testament to a rigid social order, an ever-present reminder that life could be forfeit with startling swiftness, often for reasons that might seem trivial to your modern mind. There was no lengthy appeal process if a samurai felt disrespected. Their swords were judge, jury, and, all too often, executioner, all wrapped in deadly, beautiful steel. It's a chilling thought, isn't it, to live under the constant, quiet shadow of such immediate, personal authority. That chilling thought of immediate authority, the swift justice of a samurai's blade, certainly paints a stark picture. But the dangers didn't only emanate from those in power, those sworn to uphold some semblance of order. Imagine, if you will, venturing beyond the somewhat patrolled streets of a town, or even just finding yourself in a dimly lit, crumbling quarter of a city as night begins to fall. The very air might seem to change, growing heavy with unspoken anxieties. It's here that the fear of bandits becomes truly palpable, a cold knot tightening in your stomach. And it wasn't just common brigands. Masterless ronin, samurai cast adrift without a lord to serve, roamed the land. Some were honorable, seeking new purpose, but many were desperate, their skills with the sword, their only means of survival, often leading them to less than savory occupations. Picture yourself on a lonely mountain pass, the wind sighing through ancient pines, the path ahead obscured by mist. Every shadow could conceal an ambush. Every unexpected sound, the snap of a distant twig, the sudden cry of a night bird, might signal the approach of those who lived by taking, not by creating. In the sprawling, often chaotic cities, certain districts were effectively no-go zones after dark, where the only law was the sharp edge of a blade or the brute strength of a gang. The silence in such places wouldn't be peaceful. It would be the sound of predators waiting, a heavy, watchful quiet that promised little comfort to the lost or the unwary. Lawlessness in these forgotten corners and shadowed paths wasn't just a possibility. It was an ever-present hum beneath the surface of daily life, a grim counterpoint to the structured order the shogunate sought to impose. And this undercurrent of unease, this hum of potential danger, wasn't just confined to the shadowed alleys of the cities. Beyond the urban sprawl, across the vast patchwork of meticulously tended rice paddies and brooding, forested mountains, an even greater, more sweeping instability simmered. These were the lands of the daimyo, the powerful feudal lords, each governing their domain like a miniature king, their imposing castles often stark, gray silhouettes against an indifferent sky. And these lords, well, they weren't always on the best of terms. Polite silk-robed smiles in the shogun's distant court could easily mask deep-seated rivalries, ambitions that stretched as far as the eye could see, or sometimes just old-fashioned, deeply nurtured grudges. The shadow of war, therefore, was a constant, unwelcome companion in your life. It wasn't always a declared battle, a thunderous clash of fully armored armies you could clearly see on the horizon. More often, it was a subtle shift in the air, a pervasive tension you could almost taste, a metallic tang of fear. It was the worried whispers in the village, the sudden scarcity of goods at the market, the sight of more ashigaru, foot soldiers, their banners unfamiliar, marching along the dusty roads, their lacquered armor glinting with a purpose you desperately hoped wasn't aimed your way. Imagine living with that persistent thrum of potential conflict, knowing that the rice you so carefully planted, coaxing life from the earth, might be trampled into mud by marching feet, or your small village requisitioned without a word. Your sons, or you yourself, could be swept up into service, handed a simple spear and pointed towards an enemy you'd never met. Or worse, you might find yourself a refugee, fleeing with only what you could hastily bundle onto your back, the acrid smell of distant burning villages stinging your nostrils. The cold ground your bed. Peace was a fragile, precious commodity, easily shattered by the whim of a distant, unseen lord. Your entire existence, a tiny, almost insignificant piece in their grand, often tragically bloody game of power. Even if you managed to avoid the sharp edge of a samurai's sword, or the chaos of a battlefield, daily life held its own profound anxieties. Let's say you found yourself in a sprawling city, perhaps the great Edo itself. Here, amidst the throng of humanity, another kind of destruction was a constant, unwelcome guest. The cities of feudal Japan were marvels of wood and paper, elegant in their simplicity, but terrifyingly fragile. Lanterns cast a warm glow through shoji screens. The scent of cedar and tatami mats might fill your small dwelling, a comforting illusion of permanence. But these materials, so light and natural, were tinder waiting for a spark. And sparks were plentiful. A knocked-over candle, an errant ember from a cooking fire, or even deliberate arson could unleash a nightmare. They call these devastating conflagrations Edo's flowers, a grimly poetic term for the terrifying beauty and destructive power of flames consuming whole districts. Imagine the sudden crackle, rapidly growing to a hungry roar as the blaze took hold. The night sky, usually dotted with distant stars, would blaze a furious orange, embers like fiery, malevolent blossoms carried on the wind, seeking new homes to devour. Entire neighborhoods, meticulously built and densely packed, could vanish in a matter of hours, leaving behind a smoking, barren landscape where lives and livelihoods once stood. To witness such an event, even from a supposed safe distance, was to understand how quickly everything could be undone. And if the fires, born of human carelessness or malice, weren't enough to keep you awake at night, the very earth beneath your feet offered no lasting solace. Imagine, for a moment, you're settled in your modest dwelling, the paper screens casting soft shadows, a fragile peace settling over the village. Suddenly, a low rumble begins, a deep groan from the world's belly, growing into a violent shudder that shakes the wooden beams above you as if they were mere twigs. Dust rains down, the floor beneath you lurches and twists, and the air fills with the splintering crack of wood and the distant, terrified cries of your neighbors. There's no warning, no siren, just the raw, untamed power of the earth deciding to rearrange itself. Then picture the sky, a canvas of brooding gray, as a typhoon gathers its strength far out at sea. The wind begins as a mournful whisper through the bamboo groves, escalating to a relentless, shrieking howl that tears at thatched roofs and sends debris flying like deadly projectiles. Rain lashes down in sheets, visibility drops to near zero, and the rivers, your lifeblood, swell into angry brown torrents, threatening to swallow whole communities. You'd huddle together, listening to the storm's monstrous voice, feeling impossibly small against such elemental rage. And sometimes, after the earth had finished its terrible dance, the sea itself would rise in retribution. A tsunami, a silent, colossal wall of water, appearing on the horizon with deceptive speed, sweeping inland with an unstoppable, cleansing fury, erasing everything in its path. There was no sophisticated early warning system, no organized evacuation plan to higher ground, no fleet of helicopters on the way. Just the sudden, horrifying realization that the ocean, usually a provider, had become an immense, destructive force. To survive one of these events was luck. To survive all of them, a near miracle, a testament to a resilience forged in constant uncertainty. Beyond the dramatic fury of nature's grand pronouncements, beyond the quaking earth and the ravenous sea, lay a landscape of quieter, more personal battles fought daily within the fragile confines of the human body. For even if you managed to navigate the world of shifting landscapes and sudden catastrophes, an unseen enemy was always present, waiting for the smallest opening, the slightest weakness. Think of what we now dismiss with a few days in bed, perhaps a course of pills, a bad cold, a touch of the flu. In feudal Japan, that familiar ache, the rising fever that felt like a damp, heavy cloak, the body's uncontrollable shivers, these were often the chilling overture to a far more serious performance. Influenza, carried on the breath of a neighbor or a passing traveler, could sweep through a village like an invisible phantom, leaving a trail of weakened bodies and hushed, fearful homes. Dysentery, a cruel and relentless affliction often born of water that looked clear but harbored unseen dangers, or food prepared with less than spotless hands, would drain life away with agonizing slowness, the sharp cramp in your gut, a constant, unwelcome companion. And infection, oh, the terror of a simple everyday injury. A scratch from a rough wooden beam while repairing your small dwelling. A splinter embedded in your finger as you gathered firewood. Even an insect bite that swelled and burned. Imagine watching, helpless, as a dark red line began to creep up your arm from that seemingly insignificant wound, feeling the throbbing, insistent heat spread beneath your skin. There were no gleaming vials of antibiotics, no sterile needles poised to deliver swift relief. Your body's own defenses were the sole, often overwhelmed, defenders in this intimate war. Recovery was a quiet, uncertain lottery, each sunrise a small, precious victory against the odds. Or perhaps, just a brief, fragile respite before the fever's humid grip tightened once more. That precarious hold on life, so keenly felt with every festering wound or creeping fever, was perhaps most agonizingly apparent when it came to the smallest, newest members of any feudal Japanese household. Imagine the quiet anticipation, the hushed whispers of hope and trepidation that would fill a drafty room, perhaps smelling faintly of wood smoke and herbs, as a new life was about to enter this uncertain world. A tiny bundle, swaddled tightly in homespun cloth against the pervasive chill, eyes yet to open fully to the flickering, smoky lamplight. Every soft coo, every minute, twitching movement of a perfect miniature hand, a profound spark of joy, a fragile, whispered promise for the future. Yet the air itself, the very water, seemed to carry unseen threats tailored for these little ones. The same relentless fevers that could fell a strong farmer or a seasoned warrior would sweep through a nursery with a devastating silent speed. A soft, rasping cough in the deep of night, a delicate skin that burned too warm beneath a worried palm, a sudden, chilling stillness where moments before there was breath. These were common, heartbreaking realities. The joyous arrival, celebrated with quiet hope, was so often shadowed by an equally quiet, sorrowful departure. A tiny straw doll perhaps laid beside a small, unmarked grave in a corner of a field. You might see the weary lines etched deep on a mother's face, lines carved not just by endless toil under a harsh sun, but from losses endured. Hopes kindled with such tenderness and then cruelly, almost casually, extinguished by fate, again and again. Each sunrise for an infant or a young child was not just a new day, but another small, brave defiance against an overwhelming tide of unseen dangers. Amidst such fragility, such constant negotiation with fate, the spiritual world offered not just solace, but a framework for understanding, a quiet hum beneath the surface of daily life. Imagine, as you walk, the very air feeling alive, almost breathing with unseen presences. This was a Japan where ancient Shinto beliefs saw kami, spirits or divine powers, dwelling in everything. A majestic, gnarled old pine standing sentinel for centuries, a waterfall crashing with thunderous grace onto dark, mossy rocks below, even a particularly striking weathered boulder by the roadside. Small, often unadorned shrines marked by their distinctive torii-adori gates of plain wood or vermilion lacquer would appear unexpectedly, nestled in a quiet grove of whispering bamboo or perched on a hill overlooking the fields. Places of quiet reverence where one might offer a silent prayer or a small, carefully chosen token. The scent of damp earth, cedar, and sometimes the faint, clean smell of the nearby sea would often hang heavy in the air around them. Then, intertwining with this deep reverence for nature's indwelling spirits, came the profound philosophies of Buddhism carried across the seas. Its temples, perhaps more imposing with their intricately carved wooden beams, gracefully curved tile roofs, and the resonant, almost hypnotic hum of distant chanting that seemed to vibrate in your very chest, offered a different path. Here, within dimly lit halls, you might find intricate statues of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, their faces serene, the air thick with the sweet, calming aroma of burning incense. Buddhism spoke of suffering, yes, a truth all too familiar in those times, but also of enlightenment and the intricate cycle of rebirth, providing a broader cosmic perspective to life's transient hardships and joys. These two streams of belief didn't clash. They flowed together, a spiritual river shaping the landscape of every heart and mind, guiding daily actions from the planting of rice to the mourning of the dead, and coloring every perception of the world around you. And this pervasive spiritual tapestry wasn't just about grand temples or distant deities. It wove itself into the very fabric of your waking hours, dictating the smallest of choices with an unseen hand. Imagine, for a moment, needing to plan your week. Your decisions wouldn't be guided by mere practicality, but by a calendar pulsating with lucky and unlucky days. That vital journey you planned, the one to secure rice for your family, you'd consult an almanac first, a complex chart of celestial influences, lest you set out under an inauspicious sign and invite a misfortune as real and unwelcome as a sudden, chilling fever. Your home, your clothing, perhaps even tucked into your sleeve, would hold small, potent charms, delicate slips of paper brushed with careful calligraphy, smooth, worn wooden talismans, or intricately knotted silk cords. These weren't quaint keepsakes. They were your frontline defense, your whisper of hope against the invisible. And what were they shielding you from? A world teeming with entities your modern, pragmatic mind might gently try to explain away. Spirits, the kami, animated every whispering bamboo grove and ancient gnarled tree. Ghosts, the restless asterisk yurei, weren't just tales for a cold night. Their sorrowful cries or vengeful acts were a common explanation for lingering illness, or those unsettling creaks in the floorboards when the oil lamp flickered low. And demons, the formidable Oni with their fearsome visages, weren't confined to lurid paintings. They were a genuine terror, believed to bring disease or snatch the unwary from shadowy paths. Your quiet, rational skepticism, your need for tangible proof, it would find no purchase here, only bewildered glances, perhaps even a touch of pity. In this feudal world, the unseen was just another neighbor, sometimes benevolent, often not, but always, undeniably, present. And just as the unseen spirits shaped anxieties, so too did an invisible, yet profoundly powerful concept dictate the very texture of social interaction. The idea of purity, or asterisk, kegare asterisk. This wasn't merely about washing your hands before a meal, though cleanliness was certainly valued. No, asterisk, kegare asterisk was a deeper, more pervasive sense of spiritual pollution, an invisible taint that could cling to a person through contact with death, blood, sickness, or even childbirth. It was a dangerous state, not just for the individual, but for the harmony of the entire community. Imagine, for a moment, you are walking along a narrow, sun-dappled village path. You might accidentally brush against a stray dog that has recently died, hidden in the tall grass, or perhaps pass too close to a house where a recent death has occurred, its sorrow still hanging heavy in the air. You might not even be aware of the contact or its profound significance at first, but the subtle shift in the villager's demeanor would soon become apparent. A quiet chill replacing yesterday's warmth. Eyes that once met yours with a friendly nod now slide away, perhaps finding sudden interest in a patch of dirt or the distant tree line. Conversations might halt abruptly as you approach, replaced by a strained, uncomfortable silence that feels heavier than any shout. The sharing of food, the warmth of communal gatherings, these could become barred to you, not out of malice, but out of a genuine, ingrained fear of the impurity you now carried. This accidental defilement, however unintentional, could lead to a chilling social ostracization, your world shrinking with each averted gaze. Reintegrating might involve lengthy, specific purification rites, but the memory, the slight unease, could linger like a faint, unsettling scent in the air around you. Beyond the chilling whispers of social isolation, what if the impurity wasn't just a passing stain, but something settling deeper, within your very bones? Perhaps a fever begins to bloom, a strange heat behind your eyes, or a cough that racks your frame, each tremor echoing in the thin walls of your dwelling. There's no understanding of microscopic invaders, no talk of viruses or bacteria. Instead, the village elder, or perhaps a traveling monk physician, would nod gravely, their gaze distant, considering causes far less tangible than we comprehend today. Your ailment, they might suggest, could stem from a disruption of your cause and wise tenets, that vital life energy now flowing erratically, like a river choked with debris. Or perhaps, more unsettlingly, it's the work of a malevolent spirit, an asterisk, onryo asterisk, clinging to you with unseen tendrils, siphoning your strength, a chilling thought as dusk settles. Worse still, it could be karmic retribution, the universe delivering a harsh lesson for some forgotten transgression. Yours, or even an ancestor's. The air around you would feel thick with these unseen possibilities, each more disquieting than the last. The healing, then, wouldn't involve sterile needles or precisely measured pills from a pharmacy. Imagine instead the pervasive, earthy scent of bitter herbs, a pungent brew simmering slowly over a low flame, its steam carrying faint, uncertain hopes. You might feel the peculiar, intense heat of moxibustion, small cones of dried mugwort smoldering on specific points of your skin, the sharp, almost acrid smell mingling with the ever-present aroma of wood smoke in your small home. Alongside these physical treatments, there would be prayers, earnest and repetitive, chanted to appease spirits or rebalance cosmic scales. Each syllable, each wisp of incense, a fragile thread woven into a tapestry of hope against an often indifferent fate. Beyond these personal battles of health and spirit, the world outside your immediate village unfolded at a very different pace. A pace dictated not by invisible signals buzzing through the air, but by the steady, relentless rhythm of human feet. Imagine news traveling like a single, determined raindrop, making its way down a vast mountain, each step a slow accumulation towards its distant destination. A messenger, perhaps a dedicated *Hikyaku* runner, would be the sole conduit to this wider world. Picture him, his straw sandals slapping against dusty paths, the sun beating down mercilessly, or perhaps a chilling rain soaking him to the bone, the scent of wet earth and his own exertion filling the air. He carries no glowing screen, no instant alerts, just a precious, perhaps slightly damp, scroll of paper, its ink carefully brushed. The words upon it, penned days, even weeks before, are your only window to events beyond the familiar green of your rice paddies or the dark silhouette of the nearby forest. This information, when it finally arrived, carried on the weary shoulders of the messenger, might be about a distant lord's decree, a far-off battle whose outcome was already history, or a shift in power that could, eventually, ripple down to touch your life in ways you couldn't yet fathom. In this quiet, information-starved landscape, rumor would thrive, a hardy weed in the garden of knowledge. Whispers would travel faster than the official word, morphing and twisting with each retelling. Was that skirmish a decisive victory or a minor scuffle? Fact and fiction would blur into an inseparable, often unsettling tapestry. The world beyond your valley was largely a vast, silent mystery, punctuated by these slow, uncertain echoes. It was a world where patience wasn't just a virtue, it was a fundamental component of existence itself. And as that slow, uncertain day finally surrenders to evening, a different kind of mystery begins to unfurl. The sun dips below the horizon, and with it, the familiar world dissolves into an ocean of profound, almost tangible darkness. There are no comforting electric streetlights here, no steady, reassuring glow spilling from countless windows to guide your way. Perhaps a wealthy household might possess a single, flickering engine lantern, its paper shade casting weak, dancing shadows. But for most, the night is absolute. Imagine standing at the edge of your village, or on a narrow, unpaved lane in a sleeping town. The blackness is so complete, it feels as though you could reach out and touch it, a heavy velvet curtain drawn across the land, muffling even the stars on a cloudy night. The air grows cooler, carrying with it the scent of damp earth, wood smoke from dying hearths, and perhaps the faint, unsettling aroma of something wild just beyond the periphery of human settlement. Every creak of a floorboard from a nearby silent house, every rustle in the dense undergrowth, every distant hoot of an owl is amplified, taking on a new, sometimes sinister, significance in the quiet. To venture out now is to invite peril, not merely from stumbling. The uneven ground, invisible beneath your feet, becomes a treacherous landscape of hidden roots, unseen drops, and slick patches of mud. And it's not just the physical hazards that make the night so daunting. This deep, unyielding blackness is fertile ground for the imagination, birthing and nurturing tales of yokai-shis, of spirits and demons that stalk the shadows, their forms whispered about around flickering, meager fires. The night, in many ways, belongs to them, and to those few humans brave, or perhaps desperate, enough to share its unlit, silent pathways. Not when the first pale fingers of dawn finally chase away those spectral shadows, and the chilling grip of the unlit hours begins to recede, a different kind of clock starts to tick. There are no buzzing alarms here, no glowing screens demanding your immediate attention. The sun itself is your unwavering timekeeper, its slow, majestic arc across the vast, often cloud-streaked sky dictating the rhythm of your entire existence. Its light is a precious, finite resource to be respected and utilized. For when it dips once more below the horizon, most productive human activity simply fades with it. Your days wouldn't be carved into neat, scheduled blocks, a relentless pursuit of more. Instead, they would stretch and breathe in harmony with the great turning wheel of the seasons. That constant hum of urgency you carry, the one that propels you from task to task, would seem profoundly out of place here, perhaps even a little frantic and absurd. Imagine trying to convey the pressing importance of a social media update to a village elder whose gaze is fixed on the subtle changes in the wind, or the feel of the soil between his fingers, reading signs invisible to your modern eyes. Life's concerns are more elemental, more deeply entwined with the unyielding cycles of planting, tending, harvesting, and the long, quiet introspection of winter's embrace. The very air would feel different, carrying the earthy scent of wood smoke on a crisp morning, or the rich perfume of damp soil after a summer shower, rather than the metallic tang of city pollution. Sounds would be distinct, meaningful. The distant call of a solitary bird, the rhythmic thump-thump of a wooden mallet on rice, the gentle murmur of a stream, not the constant, overwhelming barrage of urban noise. This ancient pace, this deep, almost forgotten connection to the natural world's cadence, might at first whisper of a profound peace. Yet for a mind so thoroughly conditioned to constant, rapid-fire input, this vast, enveloping quiet could also become profoundly challenging. And as that quiet settles, perhaps other more intimate comforts might come to mind. The simple act of washing away the day's grime, for instance, takes on a distinctly different hue in feudal Japan. Forget your solitary scented soak. Cleanliness was certainly valued, a virtue even, but the path to it, and the very definition, was a world away from our own brightly lit porcelain-tiled sanctuaries. Imagine, if you will, stepping towards the local bathhouse, or perhaps a shared wooden tub if you were in a more modest setting. The air inside would be thick with steam, carrying the scent of damp wood, hot water, and, well, the collective presence of everyone who had bathed before you that day. The water itself, often heated by a wood fire, would be scalding hot, a welcome shock in cooler months. But it was also a communal resource, reused by many. The lather, if any, might come from something simple like rice bran in a cloth bag, a far cry from fragrant gels. Privacy, as we cherish it, was a luxury few could afford or even expect in this aspect of life. You'd share this experience, this water, with neighbors, strangers, the young, the old. For a modern mind, accustomed to personal space and clinical sterility, this daily ritual might feel less like cleansing and more like a profound test of social endurance. The very notion of clean begins to shift, doesn't it? It becomes less about individual purity and more about a shared, communal necessity, a practical measure in a world with different pressures and different ideas of what truly mattered for well-being. And as that notion of clean recalibrates in your mind, consider what else floods your senses, particularly the very air you breathe. It's an atmosphere quite unlike anything a modern nose is prepared for, a rich, often challenging tapestry of scents that defined daily existence in feudal Japan. Imagine stepping into this world, where every inhalation brings a complex story. The most constant companion would likely be wood smoke, a fragrance clinging to the rough-spun fabric of your clothes, to the timber of every structure, a perpetual haze from countless hearths used for cooking, and the faintest of warmth. It's a smell that might, at first, seem rustic, even charming, but its relentless presence would soon underscore a life lived closer to the flame. Then, intermingling, comes the undeniable scent of animal life. Not just distant farms, but creatures often sharing living spaces. Their earthy, sometimes pungent, odors a fundamental part of the ambient air. Perhaps the most confronting aspect for our modern sensibilities, though, would be the olfactory evidence of a world without widespread, sealed sanitation. The faint, sharp, and sometimes not so faint notes of human and animal waste, of open latrines or simple refuse pits, would weave an inescapable undercurrent through it all. There's no delicately stepping around it. It's simply part of the day's sensory load, a constant reminder of the biological realities that our world so effectively conceals. This complex organic miasma wasn't an anomaly to be reported. It was the background hum, the very perfume of a pre-industrial town or village, a profound sensory signature of the era. Beyond the general aroma of daily life, there were more intimate, personal discomforts, often born in stoic silence. Imagine, if you will, the slow, insidious bloom of a toothache in feudal Japan. It begins perhaps as a dull ache, a minor protest from deep within your jaw, easily ignored amidst the day's labor. But it doesn't stay minor, does it? It intensifies. A relentless, throbbing drumbeat that steals your focus, then your sleep. A private symphony of misery conducted just for you. What would you do? There's no kindly dentist to visit, no gleaming instruments, no promise of swift relief through modern analgesics. Perhaps a local healer might offer a poultice of mashed herbs, cool and damp against your swollen cheek, smelling faintly of earth and a desperate, fragile hope. Or maybe a more dubious remedy, a chanted charm, a prayer whispered into the indifferent air. The relief, if any, would be fleeting. The pain, a stubborn, unwelcome tenant in the house of your body. Eating becomes a trial, each bite a gamble against a fresh wave of agony. The taste of infection might slowly permeate your mouth, a bitter, metallic reminder of the body's quiet betrayal. And this wasn't a rare misfortune. With coarse diets and no concept of preventative dental care as we know it, such suffering was a grimly familiar companion for many. A throbbing tooth, a swollen gum. These were not just discomforts. They were serious threats, capable of incapacitating entirely. A private misery in a world that demanded constant, unyielding resilience. Beyond the aching jaw, another, more insidious irritation would claim your attention. A constant, maddening itch that no amount of scratching could truly satisfy. These weren't just occasional annoyances. Fleas and lice were intimate, unwelcome companions in feudal Japan. A tiny, persistent army making its home in your clothes, your bedding, your very hair. Their presence was less a dramatic affliction, and more a relentless, low hum of discomfort beneath the surface of daily life. An unwelcome soundtrack to your every waking and sleeping moment. Imagine, if you will, settling down for the night, perhaps on a simple tatami mat or a futon that might itself harbor these tiny guests. Just as sleep begins to beckon, you feel that telltale prickle, that minuscule movement against your skin. A phantom tickle that blooms into a very real, very distracting bite. In the dim glow of an asterisk andon lamp, or more likely in the deep darkness of a rural night, you'd shift and scratch. A silent, personal battle waged under the thin covers. Your clothing, often crafted from hemp or rougher silks, would offer countless tiny crevices for them to hide, turning every garment into a potential mobile home for your tormentors. Relief was a precious, fleeting commodity. While bathing was practiced and certainly offered some comfort, it was only a temporary reprieve from these persistent squatters. These tiny tormentors were masters of infiltration, lurking in the seams of garments, the weave of mats, even the wooden beams of the house itself. There were no convenient chemical sprays, no readily available medicated shampoos as we know them. The fight was manual, often futile, carried out with fingernails and a weary sigh, a constant, nibbling distraction from any attempt at peace or focus. This wasn't a grand, dramatic suffering, but a pervasive, grinding irritation, a subtle, unending reminder that your personal space was never entirely your own. Beyond those unseen, itchy skirmishes, your very skin would soon protest the unfamiliar embrace of feudal Japanese attire. Imagine, if you will, the morning ritual of dressing. This isn't a quick, thoughtless slip into soft, forgiving cotton. First, the underlayers, perhaps of smoother linen or hemp, a brief concession. But then come the layers of the kimono itself, fabric chosen by season and status. It might be the slightly coarse, earthy touch of rough-spun hemp for an ordinary day, or the surprisingly stiff, rustling whisper of dyed silk if fortune or misfortune placed you higher. Each layer is meticulously wrapped, pulled just so, then bound quite firmly around your middle with the obi sash. There's an undeniable weight to this ensemble, a subtle but persistent pressure that subtly dictates your posture, restricts your breath just a fraction more than you're used to. You might feel encased, almost swaddled, your movements suddenly more deliberate, less spontaneous. Even the sleeves, wide and flowing, could feel like alien appendages, catching on things, demanding a new awareness of your own silhouette, a constant low-level negotiation with your own garments. Then, your feet. Forget the cushioned soles and gentle support you know. You'd be introduced, rather starkly, to Geta, those iconic wooden sandals. 2 solid blocks of wood, perhaps paulownia, light, but unyielding, elevate you from the often muddy, uneven ground. A thick thong strap, the hanao, wedges itself with surprising insistence between your toes. Each step becomes a conscious effort, a clattering wooden announcement of your awkward passage. The smooth, unyielding surface offers no give, no familiar flex, and the art of balancing on them, especially on anything but a perfectly flat surface, is a skill learned from childhood. This clothing isn't just fabric and wood. It's a constant physical lesson in a different way of being, a wearable constraint reminding you with every rustle, every tight bind, every clack of wood on earth, that you are utterly, uncomfortably out of your element. Just as your feet begin to send tentative ceasefires regarding the wooden geta, you'd be ushered indoors, perhaps for a meal or a formal meeting. But forget plush cushions or the familiar embrace of a chair. Here, the floor is your seat, and the expected posture is monk size. You'd be guided to kneel, folding your legs precisely beneath you, your entire upper body weight pressing down onto your ankles and heels, the tops of your feet flat against the tatami mats. For the first few moments, it might feel manageable, a quaint, even graceful custom, but the grace is fleeting for the uninitiated. Soon, a dull, insistent ache begins to bloom in your knees, a silent protest. Your ankles, unused to such direct pressure, start to feel as though they're being slowly ground down. Then comes the prickling tide of pins and needles, a relentless, fizzy static climbing from your toes up through your calves, eventually replaced by a heavy, unresponsive numbness. Your legs, disconnected, feel like sacks of cold sand. Imagine trying to follow a complex conversation or appreciate the subtle flavors of a meal when every nerve below your waist is either screaming in protest or has ominously gone silent. Every formal occasion, lasting perhaps for hours, transforms from a social gathering into a personal endurance trial. The slightest shift, the tiniest unconscious grimace, could be a breach of etiquette. The polite smile on your host's face would offer no reprieve, only the unspoken expectation that you, too, maintain this serene, if agonizing, composure. And if the sheer physical discipline didn't test your resolve, the daily sustenance, or often the quiet anxiety of its potential absence, certainly would. The traditional Japanese diet, while holding certain merits we admire today, its focus on whole grains and vegetables, presented a very different, more precarious reality on the ground in feudal times. Imagine your meals, day after day. A bowl of steamed white rice, the cornerstone of every repast, its soft, slightly sticky texture, a familiar, almost blank, canvas. Alongside it, perhaps some miso soup, its earthy, salty steam warming your face. A few pickled vegetables offering a sharp, vinegary counterpoint, their crunch a brief distraction. This might sound appealing, even cleansing for a short while, but soon the landscape of your plate, often muted in color, would reveal its stark limitations. Fresh fish, a prized delicacy, might grace your meal if you were fortunate enough to live by the sea or a well-stocked river, its silvery skin and delicate flesh a fleeting luxury. Meat, for the common person, was even rarer, more a rumor than a regular feature. The vibrant spectrum of fruits and vegetables we casually pluck from market stalls regardless of the season, that was an unimaginable bounty. Instead, the relentless cycle of seasons dictated every mouthful. A harsh winter or a failed rice crop didn't just mean tightening your obi. It meant a gnawing emptiness in your belly, a slow, insidious drain on your energy. Your body, accustomed to modern variety, would soon register the subtle, then not so subtle absences, the vitamins and minerals we rarely consider. This could manifest as a persistent, bone-deep tiredness that no amount of sleep could fully erase, a dullness to the hair and skin, a frustrating slowness for wounds to heal, a chilling susceptibility to the simplest of ailments. It's a quiet erosion of vitality, a constant low-level hum of not quite enough, subtly undermining you from within. And as that quiet erosion of vitality settles in, your surroundings, too, would offer little comfort, especially when it comes to finding a moment's peace for yourself. Imagine, if you will, settling down for the night, or simply seeking a quiet corner during the day. Your home, however, is a delicate construction of wood and paper. Those famous shoji screens, The sliding doors and walls made of translucent paper, stretched over wooden frames, are undeniably elegant. They filter the light beautifully, creating a soft, diffused glow within. But these paper-thin barriers offer precious little in the way of soundproofing. Think of it. Every cough from the neighboring dwelling, every whispered argument from the family sharing your thin roof, the muffled cries of a baby, the scolding of a child, even the intimate sighs or the rustling of bedclothes from the next room, all of it would drift through. The soft brush of a kimono against the tatami mat in the next partitioned space, the clink of a teacup, the low murmur of a prayer, these tiny domestic sounds, usually insulated by our solid walls, would instead become an inescapable part of your own inner world, as if the walls themselves were breathing along with the lives they barely contained. Personal solitude, the kind we often take for granted, would be an almost alien concept. Life was lived much more openly, much more audibly. Your moments of frustration, your quiet joys, even your sniffles from a common cold, would likely be shared inadvertently with those around you. There's a certain raw honesty to it, perhaps, but also a constant subtle pressure of being perpetually heard. Forget trying to have a truly private conversation, or even just to sit with your own thoughts, undisturbed by the daily symphony of your neighbors' lives, playing out just a few fragile sheets of paper away. The very notion of a private interior life, shielded from the ears of others, would need to be fundamentally recalibrated. Beyond the constant, sometimes intrusive, presence of others, the very bedrock of your daily survival would crumble. Imagine, as the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of violet and gray, a deep chill begins to seep into your bones. That gnawing hunger, a familiar companion, reminds you of the need for fire. But there are no matches here, no convenient lighters, only perhaps some damp kindling, a rough piece of flint if you're fortunate, and your own increasingly clumsy hands, trying to coax a stubborn spark into life. The scent of wood smoke from a distant, more capable hearth might drift on the breeze, a mocking perfume. And what would you place upon that hard-won flame, assuming you even managed it? The lush, green expanse of the forest, so beautiful from afar, becomes a perilous larder. Which berries offer a fleeting sweetness, and which promise a swift, agonizing sickness? That vibrant red mushroom, so striking against the damp earth, could be a delightful morsel, or your last, without a lifetime of learned wisdom. Every rustle of leaves, every unfamiliar root, is a gamble with your well-being. Then, picture yourself needing to find your way, perhaps to a stream for water, or to seek meager shelter. No comforting glow from a pocket-sized screen, no satellite voice to guide your steps. Just winding, often unmarked paths. Maybe a distant, cloud-wreathed mountain peak as your sole, unreliable landmark. The landscape, for all its stark beauty, would offer few concessions to your modern disorientation. These fundamental skills, reading the land, coaxing flame from stone, discerning sustenance from poison, were as natural as breathing to the people of feudal Japan. For you, however, they would represent an almost insurmountable wall, leaving you feeling profoundly, and perhaps perilously, out of your depth. And should you find some form of dwelling, perhaps a simple peasant's hut, prepare for a new kind of vulnerability. Forget solid walls and double-glazed windows. Your new home, if you could call it that, might be fashioned from wood, mud, and rice paper. Beautiful in its minimalist way, perhaps, but hardly a fortress against the elements. Imagine the winter chill, a palpable, creeping cold that even the thickest quilt, if you were lucky enough to possess one, couldn't fully dispel. The wind, a mournful singer, would whistle through countless tiny gaps in the paper shoji screens, those delicate dividers offering scant resistance to its icy breath. A small charcoal brazier, the hibachi, might glow in the center of the room, a tiny ember of warmth in a sea of cold, its smoky scent filling the air, but its heat would barely reach the corners of your small, shared space. You'd feel the cold in your bones, a constant gnawing companion. Then, picture the summers. The oppressive, damp heat would hang heavy in the air, turning your fragile shelter into a sweltering box. with those same paper screens offering little insulation against the sun's determined rays. The air inside would become thick, sticky, and alive with the buzz of unseen insects, perhaps the gentle yet persistent drone of cicadas just outside your thin walls. There'd be no gentle hum of air conditioning, no whirring fan to offer even a moment's respite from the clinging humidity. You'd simply endure, your skin always a little damp, the air heavy in your lungs. This constant, direct exposure to the changing moods of the sky, the bite of the frost or the weight of the summer heat, would shape your days, and indeed, your very survival, in ways you've likely never fathomed. Beyond the constant negotiation with the elements, another kind of profound uncertainty would cloud your every waking moment: the terrifyingly arbitrary nature of justice. Imagine for a moment a simple disagreement escalating in the dusty marketplace, a voice raised in anger, a finger suddenly, decisively pointed your way. There would be no lengthy, careful investigation, no patient sifting of evidence under flickering candlelight, no sober deliberation by a jury of your peers weighing facts and testimonies. Justice in feudal Japan was often a swift, stark, and public spectacle, delivered with a chilling efficiency designed as much for grim deterrence as for any true resolution. A single samurai, perhaps a stern-faced retainer of the local daimyo, might be the sole arbiter of your fate. His judgment, formed after a brief, perhaps impatient hearing, or even just based on his own deeply ingrained perception of honor, hierarchy, and social order, would be absolute and terrifyingly swift. The cold glint of polished steel from his asterisk katana, the unwavering, impassive gaze of unquestioned authority, these would constitute your courtroom, your judge, your jury. There'd be no softly spoken lawyer to plead your case, no comforting prospect of a higher court for appeal, no system designed to protect the innocent. The very air around you would feel heavy, not just with the familiar summer humidity, but with the oppressive weight of unspoken rules and the sudden, chilling finality of a decision. One misplaced word, one unintended slight, one moment of defiance, and your fate could be sealed, often brutally, before the sun even reached its zenith. Your life, so precious and complex to you, could be extinguished with the same casual swiftness a farmer might swat a bothersome fly from his arm, a stark reminder of your place in a rigidly structured world. Beyond these brutal, swift judgments lay an even more intricate, almost invisible system of control, one that governed every breath, every glance, the concept of face. This wasn't simply about personal pride as you might understand it, though that was certainly a thread in its complex weave. No. This face was the collective honor of your family, your village, even your distant lord, a delicate shared veneer that could be shattered by the slightest misstep. It was the silent currency of respect, and losing it, for yourself or for your group, was a profound and public humiliation. Imagine yourself then thrust into this world, your modern informality clashing wildly with ancient decorum. You try to be friendly. Perhaps you offer a casual greeting or a direct question, things you wouldn't think twice about today. But here, in feudal Japan, each syllable, each gesture, is weighed on scales you cannot see, their balance calibrated by centuries of tradition. The tilt of a head, the depth of a bow, the very words you choose, or, crucially, those you don't choose, could inadvertently cause grievous offense, stripping someone, or yourself, of this vital dignity. The air, already thick with unspoken rules, would grow heavier still around you, each interaction a potential minefield. To cause another to lose face was not a mere social blunder. It was a profound insult, sometimes demanding restitution that could be terrifyingly final. A poorly timed jest, an unthinking compliment that somehow implied inadequacy, even an innocent question about a sensitive topic could unleash a silent storm of resentment. You might not even realize your transgression until the atmosphere turned icy, until polite smiles became fixed, brittle masks, their eyes holding a new, unsettling light. Navigating this invisible lattice of obligation and honor would be a constant, exhausting performance. A dance where one wrong step could lead not just to shame, but to something far, far worse. The exhaustion of constantly monitoring your every word, every glance, is just the surface, a symptom of a much deeper, more pervasive force. Beneath this delicate web of personal honor lies a foundation far more unyielding: the colossal weight of tradition, settling over everything like centuries of undisturbed dust. It's not merely about respecting your elders, though that is paramount. It's about the ancestral ways being the only ways, etched into the very soul of society like ancient calligraphy on a weathered stone tablet, its grooves deepened by the passage of countless seasons. Imagine trying to suggest a new method, a slightly more efficient approach to, say, rice farming, or the intricate polishing of a sword blade. Your suggestion, born of what you consider logic or innovation, would likely be met with a quiet, perhaps even pitying, smile, the kind reserved for a well-meaning but hopelessly naive child. "This is how it has always been done," they would murmur, the words carrying the unspoken authority of countless generations, a gentle but unbreakable decree. "This is the path our ancestors walked, and it has served us well. Your earnest explanations about progress, your well-meaning attempts to introduce a different way of thinking, would wash over them like a spring shower on a weathered mountain, briefly noticed perhaps a momentary coolness, but ultimately changing nothing of its fundamental ancient form." These weren't people actively choosing to be stubborn, not in the way we might understand it. They were upholding a sacred continuum, a deeply ingrained belief that the old ways held a profound, time-tested wisdom that new, untested ideas could only corrupt or dilute. To challenge that was to challenge the very essence of their world. Your very desire for change, for merely questioning the established order, might be seen not as forward-thinking, but as a dangerous ripple in a placid, carefully maintained pond, a sign of a restless, perhaps even untrustworthy spirit. Think of the air itself, thick with the scent of aged wood from unchanging temple beams, the faint, sweet aroma of incense that has perfumed those halls for centuries, the rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer shaping metal with techniques passed down, unchanged, from master to apprentice. Every sight, every sound, every familiar smell reinforces the permanence, the almost sacred immutability of it all. To them, your bright ideas, your modern perspectives, might seem like the babbling of a child. Innocent, perhaps, but ultimately irrelevant to the serious, solemn business of maintaining a world that had, for centuries, found its delicate equilibrium in sameness. Your mind, so accustomed to questioning and innovating, would find itself in a beautifully crafted, yet utterly unyielding cage of custom. Beyond this unyielding cage of custom, another, perhaps more immediate challenge would greet you: the sheer, unadulterated physical grind of daily existence. There are no quiet mornings eased into with a warm drink made at the touch of a button. Instead, the pre-dawn chill, sharp and insistent, seeps through the paper shoji screens or the rough wooden planks of a peasant's dwelling. Water for a meager wash or for the day's cooking doesn't flow from a tap. It's a heavy burden, drawn from a distant well or stream, carried on shoulders that are already learning the language of perpetual ache. Every task, from preparing the simplest meal over a smoky, temperamental hearth to tilling the unyielding earth with rudimentary tools, demands a physical toll that our modern bodies, softened by convenience, can scarcely comprehend. Imagine the sun, a relentless overseer, beating down as you stoop for hours in a rice paddy, mud squelching coolly, then, uncomfortably, between your toes, your back a symphony of protest. Or picture the endless chopping of wood, the rhythmic thud, a soundtrack to your growing fatigue. Each swing of the axe, a negotiation with your dwindling energy reserves, the scent of fresh-cut pine sharp in the air. This isn't the satisfying tiredness after a chosen exertion. It's a pervasive, bone-deep weariness, a constant hum beneath the surface of every waking moment. It would seep into your thoughts, dull your senses, and make even the simplest acts of self-care feel like monumental efforts. Sleep, when it finally came on a thin futon or a mat of woven straw, would be less a gentle drift and more a desperate plunge, a brief, insufficient respite before the cycle began anew. The sheer, unremitting effort of just being would be a relentless adversary. And beyond that profound physical exhaustion we spoke of, a different kind of weariness would begin to take root. The exhaustion of the mind, stretched taut by the constant, silent demand for vigilance. Every single moment would be a puzzle you're desperately trying to solve, each interaction a delicate dance where one misstep, one incorrectly tied knot, or wrongly uttered phrase could lead to, well, best not to dwell too intently on the quiet, swift consequences in such a structured world. The very air itself would feel thick with unspoken rules, a language of lowered eyes, subtle inhalations, and almost imperceptible gestures you haven't yet learned to read. Imagine the strain, the constant thrumming beneath your awareness, as you try to decipher the subtle shift in a samurai's posture, the almost imperceptible tightening around a merchant's eyes. Was it disapproval, a flicker of amusement, or something far more serious, a quiet judgment being passed? This isn't just about not knowing the words. It's about not knowing the world, its cadence, its intricate etiquette. The weight of potential error, the sheer mental effort of trying to fit into a social fabric woven from threads entirely alien to you, would be immense. You'd be constantly translating, not just language but intent, meaning, and the very essence of propriety, an exhausting internal monologue second-guessing every instinct. Your own familiar customs, your natural way of being, would feel clumsy, heavy, even dangerous here. The simple act of walking down a bustling street, of trying to purchase a warm rice ball, would become a high-stakes performance, and the applause you're hoping for is merely to go unnoticed, to avoid causing offense, to simply blend into the background. That continuous low hum of anxiety, the fear of the unknown faux pas, would be a shadow clinging to your every thought, making true rest an elusive dream. Beyond this constant mental ballet, where every glance and gesture is scrutinized, your body too would begin its own quiet, insistent rebellion. It wouldn't be a sudden, dramatic collapse, but a slow accumulation of discomforts, a relentless barrage that chips away at your resolve. The itching, for instance, perhaps from the rough-spun hemp of your simple garment, or the unwelcome attention of tiny, unseen lodgers in the tatami mats, a persistent, maddening tickle you're too self-conscious to scratch. Then come the aches. Your muscles, accustomed to chairs and soft beds, would scream in protest from hours spent kneeling in *siza, a posture of respect that feels like refined torture to unyielding Western joints. Sleep, sought on a thin futon laid upon hard wooden floors, would offer little respite. You'd likely awaken to a chorus of creaks and groans from your own body, each one a fresh grievance. And the smells. Oh, the smells! The air, thick and layered, a constant companion. The sharp tang of wood smoke from 1,000 cooking fires, yes, but woven through with the unmistakable, earthy aroma of open drainage, the pungent whisper of night soil used as fertilizer, the close scent of unwashed humanity, and the slightly musty, organic perfume of damp wood and straw. It's a rich tapestry, to be sure, just not one your nose is trained to appreciate. Even the simple act of sating hunger becomes an unfamiliar challenge. That hollow ache in your stomach, a gnawing emptiness that a small bowl of rice and some pickles can only temporarily appease, not truly vanquish. It's a constant, low hum of want, a reminder of the body's relentless needs in a world not designed for your comfort. Beyond that persistent, gnawing hunger, a far deeper and more unsettling chill begins to creep into your bones. It's the slow, dawning, and quite profound realization that you are utterly adrift, a ghost out of time. You might try to speak, to form words of polite inquiry or desperate plea, but your voice, even to your own ears, sounds foreign, out of place. The syllables you utter are met not with understanding, but perhaps with a patient, pitying confusion, or worse, a flicker of suspicion in eyes that see only an outsider, an unknown. The intricate dance of bows, the precise angles of deference, the subtle shifts in tone that carry immense weight, These are the true currency of communication here, and you are utterly bankrupt. This isn't merely about the inconvenience of a language barrier. It's a more fundamental disconnect, a shattering loss of your perceived control. Your 21st century assumptions of agency, of being able to influence your surroundings, to assert your needs, simply dissolve like mist in the morning sun. You are a leaf on a vast, indifferent river, swept along by currents of a rigid social order you cannot map, let alone redirect. The hierarchy is as unyielding as the mountains in the distance. Your place within it, or rather, outside of it, terrifyingly fixed. There's no managing expectations here, no personal growth journey to embark upon, only the stark reality of your insignificance. And so the sheer weight of this impotence, this crushing inability to meaningfully connect, to change your circumstances, or even to truly understand the silent, unwritten laws that govern every breath around you, would begin to settle. It's a heavy cloak, this powerlessness, woven from incomprehension and the cold threads of isolation. A quiet, internal erosion more profound than any physical hardship, hollowing you out from the inside, leaving you to wonder if you even exist in any meaningful way in this world that was never meant for you, under skies that offer no familiar comfort. This internal hollowing doesn't happen in a vacuum, of course. You're not cast adrift on a deserted island. Far from it. Feudal Japan is a tapestry woven with countless lives, a bustling, thrumming world of people, their days filled with purpose and ritual, their faces etched with stories you can only guess at. You are surrounded by humanity, by the murmur of conversation, the distant laughter, the soft shuffle of feet on tatami mats. But what good are these crowds? These faces passing in the dusty laneways or the hushed corridors of a temple, when the very words to bridge the gap between your mind and theirs are lost. Imagine trying to share a worry that gnaws at you, a fleeting observation that might, in another life, spark a smile or a knowing nod. Here it remains trapped, a silent bird beating its wings against the cage of your ribs, understood by no one but yourself. The complex tapestry of human emotion, normally shared and softened through language, becomes entirely your burden. Think of the simplest human connection. A shared laugh. You see something that strikes you as absurd. A small, everyday comedy in the way a stray cat meticulously grooms itself on a temple step, or a merchant fumbles his wares. But the cultural context, the very nuance of the humor, is utterly alien. Your smile finds no echo. Your attempt at levity might be met with blank stares, or worse, a polite but firm suspicion. And what a fear! A sudden tremor in the earth, a strange shadow in the paper screen, a whispered rumor you can't quite decipher. These anxieties fester when they cannot be voiced, when there's no one to offer a word of reassurance, however flimsy. This isn't merely about being unable to ask for directions or order food, though those are certainly trials. It's about the slow starvation of the soul, the withering of that part of us that thrives on shared experience, on the simple, profound act of being understood. Even amidst the clatter of wooden sandals on packed earth, the murmur of vendors selling their fish and pickled vegetables, the distant, resonant sound of a temple bell calling monks to prayer, you are an island of one, adrift in an ocean of unintelligible sound and unreadable faces. This profound, inescapable loneliness, a silence not of the ears but of the spirit, might just be the most insidious challenge of all. A quiet, gnawing emptiness that no amount of rice, however carefully prepared, or warm sake, however generously poured, could ever truly fill. It is the crushing weight of your own isolated consciousness. And beyond that crushing weight of your isolated consciousness lies a landscape paved with peril. Not always the clash of steel you might imagine, but something far quieter, more insidious. A fatal misstep in this intricate dance of custom and hierarchy seems almost inevitable. Imagine for a moment, you attempt a gesture of respect, a bow perhaps. But your angle is slightly off, your hand's not quite right. To you, it's a simple awkwardness. To a samurai whose honor is as keenly edged as his blade, it could be a profound insult, met first with a chilling stillness, then perhaps the almost silent shink of a sword being drawn just an inch from its scabbard. a warning, or a prelude. The glint of sunlight on that polished steel would be the last thing you see. Or perhaps it's not a social blunder, but your own body that falters. A sudden fever begins to bloom behind your eyes, a relentless cough shaking you in the shared smoky room where you sleep on rough tatami. There are no familiar comforts here, no gentle remedies, only the acrid smell of unfamiliar herbs and the murmur of incantations that mean nothing to you. The feeling of your own vitality slipping away, a quiet surrender in a world that offers no solace. Sometimes, it's simply being in the wrong, narrow, lantern-lit passage when unspoken tensions finally ignite. A sudden brawl, the sharp cries, the dull thud of wooden staves. You are merely an obstruction, an unknown, swept away in the sudden, brutal tide. These aren't heroic defeats. They are the quiet, almost mundane ways your journey might end. A forgotten footnote in a history that barely noticed your arrival. Beyond these sudden, stark endings, there lies a slower, perhaps more insidious, unraveling. Imagine the constant, gnawing anxieties, the fear of disease without remedy, the dread of offending someone powerful without even realizing it, the sheer, relentless physical toll of a life spent in laborious deference. Your mind, accustomed to a different rhythm, a different set of reassurances, would find itself adrift in a sea of incomprehensible rules and constant low-level threats. There's a limit to how much strangeness, how much unrelenting pressure one can absorb. At some point, the spirit, the very will to keep going, might simply begin to fray. It's not a dramatic snap, more like a slow, weary sigh of resignation. Your body, already pushed by unfamiliar labor, strange food that sits heavy and unfamiliar, and the ever-present threat of illness, would start to echo this internal surrender. Even simple tasks would feel monumental, your limbs leaden. The vibrant tapestry of this feudal world, initially perhaps overwhelming but intriguing, would fade. Its colors would dim, its sounds become a distant, meaningless hum, its intricate social dances a blur. You no longer have the energy or the desire to decipher. The drive to understand, to fit in, to merely survive, would wane. Each sunrise might bring not a fresh resolve, but a heavier cloak of exhaustion, a wish to simply not wake. Your thoughts, once racing to process this alien landscape, would slow, turning inward, seeking a quiet corner of oblivion that simply doesn't exist in this demanding reality. This isn't about weakness, it's about the fundamental incompatibility, the point where the human machine, pushed so far beyond its known parameters, begins to quietly, inexorably power down. The world continues, indifferent to your fading presence, a testament to its own enduring and often brutal rhythm. And so, our hypothetical day in feudal Japan draws to its weary close. The last sliver of the sun, perhaps a bruised orange melting behind distant silhouetted mountains, finally dips from view, leaving behind a sky the color of deep, cool water. There's no triumphant fanfare, no surge of adrenaline marking your conquest over this harsh land. Instead, what settles upon you, like a fine, inevitable dust, is a profound quiet. It's an understanding that echoes not in grand pronouncements, but in the deep ache of your muscles, the persistent, gnawing emptiness in your stomach, and the heavy, almost comforting thrum of exhaustion that pulses behind your eyelids, urging them closed. The air, cooling rapidly, might carry the faint earthy scent of distant wood smoke, or perhaps just the damp earth itself, breathing out the day's accumulated toil. This isn't a failure. It's an immersion, however brief, into a world that demanded an entirely different calibration of human spirit, a constant outward vigilance that leaves little room for the inward journeys we so often take. The resilience of those who truly called this era home, who woke day after day to its unyielding demands and subtle dangers, feels almost unimaginable from our soft vantage point. They navigated a landscape where survival was an art form, each breath a quiet negotiation. As you imagine your own brief, exhausting sojourn ending, as your consciousness willingly retreats from this demanding stage, a deeper appreciation might bloom for the simple, almost unnoticed comforts of your own world. And with that quiet understanding, that gentle letting go, perhaps you drift gently off into the soft embrace of sleep. Thank you for joining us on PlotFall. Until our next story, may your thoughts be calm and your rest deep.